What's the deal, my people? You know it is Don Tony Teflon, and this one is Asked and Answered, where I take one question from you and answer it. And joining me on this edition of Asked and Answered is the one and only Gray Area. Hello, how are you?
Hello, how are you? I'm ready to answer this one question you have.
And if you want to get your question on Asked and Answered, all you have to do is subscribe and leave a question in the comments section. And that's all it basically is. And we will feature your question on Asked and Answered. Now, this week's Asked and Answered is going to be, who is responsible for Robert's rebellion? So we're going to give you a breakdown of this, exactly what happened during this, that code led up to this rebellion. And then we're going to get into who we think is fully responsible and caused it. Now, there could be a lot of people that could say they hold a little bit of responsibility here and there, but I do believe that it has to come down to one person who had the ability to prevent this from happening, or had the ability that set this whole thing off.
Tell me we're not speaking of this.
Oh, it's unspeakable to you? What her father did to your family, that was unspeakable.
What Rhaegar Targaryen did to your sister, the woman I loved.
I'll kill every Targaryen I get my hands on.
When we look at it, there are really three things that led up to Robert's rebellion, right? We have tourney at Harrenhal, then we have the death of Brandon and Rickard Stark, and third, the calling for the execution of Robert Baratheon, Ned Stark, and Jon Arryn. So we'll first start with Harrenhal.
So the tourney of Harrenhal was a tourney in the spring. It was during the fall spring. It was a huge tourney that Rhaegar allegedly had staged to get all the great lords of the Seven Kingdoms to Westeros, or to Harrenhal in one place. And Varys allegedly thought it was a coup, and that's how the Mad King ended up at the tourney of Harrenhal. But during the tourney of Harrenhal, there was a thing that happened, and it is that Rhaegar won the tilt. He won the joust and tilt, and he got to pick a queen of love and beauty. He rode by his wife, Elia Martell, and placed a crown of flowers on Lyanna Stark's head. And at the time, Lyanna Stark was betrothed to Robert Baratheon. And that's basically the tourney of the Harrenhal. There was other things going on, like the Knight in the Laughing Tree was at the tourney. Howland Reed was there. Ned Stark danced with the Shardane. Sir Barristan danced with the Shardane. Mm-hmm. So that's basically...
Yeah, so basically, this is what made everybody mad. And it's funny that Brandon was the most mad out of everybody. I mean, really don't hear about Robert being too offended by that at all, but we do hear about Brandon losing his mind that Rhaegar would do this. Now, I don't know if that means Brandon had something against Rhaegar, they didn't like each other, I have no idea. But you would think that Robert Baratheon would be more mad about that and upset about that, but we really don't hear about him being that mad. Now, real quick with this, since we're doing on the tourney of Harrenhal, I asked you this question. Do you think that Lyanna Stark was the Knight of the Laughing Tree, and then Rhaegar discovered her, and that is one reason why he fell in love with her?
I definitely think she was the Knight of the Laughing Tree, and I definitely think that's how he discovered her. But I don't necessarily think that that's when he fell in love with her.
So that is the first thing that happened that led to this rebellion. The second trigger to all of this was the kidnapping of Lyanna Stark. Now, it is alleged that at some point, we don't even know exactly when, that Rhaegar kidnapped Lyanna Stark. Now, when Brandon was at Riverrun preparing to marry Catelyn Tully, he left her to go meet the party that was coming down, his father and them, to have his wedding. At this is the time where Brandon finds out about Lyanna and Rhaegar, and in the haste, people want to call it wolf blood. Some people may say stupidity, but he rushes off there with his boys down to King's Landing, and he demands Rhaegar to come out and die. The Crown Prince to come out and die. Instead, he is met by, I don't know why he thought he can get away with that, but instead he is met by King's guardsmen who grab him up and bring him inside and say that he committed treason because he threatened the life of Rhaegar. Now, during this time, his father comes down there to try to negotiate his son's release. King Aerys says that he's a traitor too, so Rickard then demands a trial by combat. After he puts on his suit of armor, thinking he's going to fight a King's guardsman, Aerys says the champion of House Targaryen is fire. And that's when they grab him up, string him up, and start slowly cooking him in his armor. At this time, they put a sword on the floor and a choking device on Brandon and say, hey, if you can get free, you can save your father. And he winds up choking himself to death. Lord Rickard Stark winds up being cooked to death. That's trigger number 2. And the third trigger that started this rebellion is?
It is when Aerys sent a raven to the Vale of Arryn, to Jon Arryn, the Lord of the Vale, Warden of the East, and demanded that he send the heads of Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon, which used to be Jon Arryn's wards, to King's Landing, to him, basically to give him the traitors. And Jon Arryn says no, calls his banners, and it's war.
Exactly. So we have 3 triggers that triggered Robert's rebellion. And I believe if any one of those triggers was not pulled, this does not happen. Now, some people may say it's obvious who's the responsible, but I don't think it's that obvious. Gray, do you think it's an obvious answer of who is totally responsible for this, or is there some secret that people did not pick up on?
Well, there's 2 ways I can answer that question. Like you said, there is a lot of things that were responsible. But I feel that there is possibly, and I've said this since the video I posted on the theory video that I did about this in 2017, which is that there's someone that had an interest in chaos. There's someone that wanted harm done to Brandon Stark. And that someone is Littlefinger.
Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail, never get to try again. And some are given a chance to climb, but they refuse. Only the ladder is real. The climb is all there is.
And that is who Gray is going with. Gray believes that Littlefinger is the person who is directly responsible for Robert's rebellion. So we allow Gray to explain her findings and why she believes this.
Okay, so before Robert's rebellion, before Brandon goes to King's Landing and signs his own death warrant because it's stupid to go to King's Landing and tell the crown prince to come out and die. Like, you can't threaten the royal family. But before that, there is a duel that Brandon has, and this duel is between Brandon Stark and Littlefinger, because Littlefinger is in love with Catelyn Tully, and he challenges Brandon to a duel. Brandon almost kills him. If Brandon had killed him, the world would have been a better place. So we know that in the World of Ice and Fire, it says that Lyanna Stark had went missing somewhere around Harrenhal, not far from Harrenhal. And we know that they end up in Dorne. So that's a long way to go on the road, especially being Rhaegar. Like, people are going to know Rhaegar when they see him. So I think that they took a ship. And then Littlefinger, after he got in combat with Brandon, he stayed in Riverrun for a little while to heal. And then he left to go to like Salt Pans to go home to the Fingers. So I think Littlefinger, nosy-ass Littlefinger, likely saw Rhaegar and Lyanna, and instead of minding his business, he embellished the story. Like, they kidnapped her. Brandon, you must do something. And Littlefinger knows how Brandon is going to react. anybody that knows Brandon knows how he's going to react. He's going to react wildly because that's who he is. That's who he's always been.
Ah, the Starks. Quick tempers, slow minds.
And Littlefinger has always been a sneaky bastard. Think about it. If he was mad, he was still so mad at the start. 16 years later, he was still mad he was still so consumed with anger that he didn't have Catelyn. He was still in love with her. 16 years later. So you think a month after he got in a duel with Brandon, he's still not mad? He's probably even more pissed a month later than he is 16 years later. So I definitely think it is very possible that he had a hand in it, because we know for sure he had a hand in the War of Five Kings.
No doubt about it. And Littlefinger, as you said, is a sneaky bastard. There's no doubt about it. He would do something like this. And, you know, he had to learn how to be sneaky at some point. And that him getting cut in the chest, I think, is the root how he realized, hey, I can't beat these guys at their game. Let me try a new game. This could be the new game that he tried. And he could have started this game at this particular time to get rid of one of his rivals. And that was Brandon, because he did do a lot for Catelyn Stark. He was willing to, you know, this guy, I don't know what it was, you know, whether he was enamored with who he thought she was and compared to who she really was, that could be debatable. But whatever she put on him, he had something like, he just felt like, I have to have her in my life when this is all said and done. You know, even in the show, when you see him then talking about it, he says she's not that good looking, but she has good genes. No, she's not that good looking and everything else, but he's still in love with her. So I do believe that's a good possibility. And I love that theory when you first came out with it. I loved it back then, and I still love it right now. Now, we do have other people. People may say, what about Rhaegar and Lyanna? Do you think that they are responsible? Could they be considered responsible for this whole mess?
Yeah, I do think they are. They should take responsibility. First off, I think personally that is barbaric. Like, the rules of Westeros are barbaric. Like, if she doesn't want to marry Robert, she shouldn't have to marry Robert. You know what I mean? But if you're going to run away with the prince, then you need to tell someone that you're not being kidnapped. And I don't even think it's necessarily like, even if she did say she wasn't kidnapped, they will look at it that way because they didn't give him permission. You know what I mean? They look at women in Westeros like as property. So if she said, you know, I'm going with him, they would say, no, you're not. And if she did anyway, then basically he took her because they didn't permit it. You have to have, like, the father has to, the father controls what goes on with the daughter.
Indeed. And that leads me to who I believe holds 100% responsibility for all this happening. And if he would have did what he should have done, then this would have never have happened. And that's why I have to blame Lord Rickard Stark for this whole mess. Everything is his fault. Everything could have been prevented if he chose to prevent it, but he did not. So let's give you some background on this man, Lord Rickard Stark, so you can understand exactly why I feel this way. Now, it was Lord Rickard who negotiated the betrothal for his heir Brandon to Catelyn Tully. Rickard accepted the betrothal between his daughter Lyanna and Lord Robert Baratheon of Storm's End, when Eddard is the one who brought back the idea to him for them to be married. So we can see right here that Lord Rickard Stark was playing a long game. He was trying to somehow spread his roots into two different spots and make the best possible deal. Now, it is said that his maester, or Lord Dustin, Lady Dustin, she says that his maester had a lot to do with it. And I do believe that maesters do have a lot of influence, but I think that was it. Now, that is one of the reasons why I believe that he should have been happy when the prince got with her. If this is a guy who was all about, listen, I want my daughter to be in the best position. She's going to marry the person who runs the Stormlands. How much better is it if she marries the person that runs the whole Seven Kingdoms?
He's already married.
Huh?
He's already married.
Doesn't matter at this particular time. We're not worried about getting married. He's gonna get divorced. He's gonna get divorced. He wasn't just, it would have been, it should have been a better thing for him. And that's a pretty big upgrade, right? I mean, you can't really upgrade much more than that. This is as big as it gets. She's gonna be the queen of Westeros. And instead of looking at it that way, he looks at it as the way of she was kidnapped. He had to realize that there's no way she could have been kidnapped. And that's why he had to go along with the kidnapping to try to save face, I believe, Two Storms End and Robert Baratheon. He went along with that story just so he didn't look bad. But there's no way I could believe that he truly believed she was kidnapped.
But do you think that he went along with it? Because really the only person we know that went along with it was Brandon. And Rickard just kind of went to King's Landing because he wanted to get Brandon.
Yeah,
back.
well, that story was out there, right? So he had to know about the story. It wasn't like she just disappeared one day and then that was it. The story, the rumor that she was kidnapped by Ray, they knew exactly who she was with. They knew who did it, right? It's not like Lyanna got kidnapped. By who? No one knows. She got kidnapped by Prince Rhaegar, right? He had to know the story of Harrenhal. That was the talk of the town. Everyone said that's when the smile stopped, right? Everyone's seen it. So he had to know. If it doesn't take a genius here, right, to realize, let's see, this crown prince wins a tournament, and instead of crowning his own wife of love and beauty, he crowns my daughter. Now he's gone with my daughter. It's not hard to tell what's going on here, right? It's not like it's just out of the blue he just took her. Something led him to take her. And it wasn't a gesture of hate. It was a gesture of love. So he had to think here, hey, if you're smart, and I'm going to assume he's some smart people, anyone could have seen that, hey, he took her out of love, not to harm her, not to do anything bad to her. He took her because he was affectionate with her. Now, Lyanna could have sent a letter. This is not hard to do. I don't know why people can't send ravens and explain to him, Dad, I love the prince. I'm in love with this man. I want to be with this man for the rest of my life. And that's how can he say, you know what? I'm going to allow you to marry him over Robert Baratheon, no doubt about it. This is the goddamn prince.
Well, I think it's a little more complicated. Like, Rhaegar is married, and I don't think divorce is we've never heard of somebody getting divorced in Westeros. Either a wife dies and they remarry. Like, I've never heard, like, I just put my wife to the side. You do see it with Targaryens, but it always causes a lot of issues with the faith. So, like, Maegor did it, took multiple brides, and Aegon did it, but it causes issues. So, I mean, I don't necessarily know that Rickard would have said no, but I know, like, Starks are men of honor. So if he has said to Robert Baratheon, there's been a betrothal, and, he's done this on his honor as a Stark, then he's going to keep it. Now, we don't know if Lyanna ever came to her dad and said, like, I don't want to marry him. We know that she told Ned that she didn't think Robert could stay to one bed, and basically that Robert would cheat on her, but she then goes with a guy that's cheating on his wife that has 2 kids. So that's weird. I mean,
the story is not cut and dry. It totally isn't. But I do believe that Rickard should have known, and I do believe he did know, that she was not kidnapped. I think that there's no way to me to think that he actually believed that she was kidnapped against her will. Next, I will say he could have stopped the whole Brandon Stark situation from going down there too. He could have told Brandon to chill. He could have told Brandon, don't do it. No matter how hot-headed Brandon was, he was still his father, and that still holds sway. He could have demanded, Brandon, you're not going no matter what. Stay put. But he allowed his son to go down there and threaten the crown prince. Those two things, I do believe, he could have stopped, and that would have stopped the war. And I think those two triggers that he didn't stop is what led to the war. I think he had the most to do, easily could have stopped it. Because, as you said, I believe that Littlefinger could be 100% responsible of the rumor, but he could have been smart enough not to believe the rumor. Because I cannot believe that he truly thought that Rhaegar kidnapped his daughter against his will after all the information he had about her. I can't believe that he would think that.
Well, I don't think that he thought that. And I don't think he acted like that, because what he does, and I also don't think he knew how crazy and fucked up the Mad King was, because what he does, he doesn't raise an army and go to King's Landing. He goes to King's Landing solo with like just his regular guards. Like he doesn't take an army with him to get Brandon back. He just goes there thinking that they can make peace and he can get his son back. And it's not just Brandon. It's like two of Brandon's friends. I can't think of their names right now. And their fathers too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Brandon is the reason why he went. If the other people went, he would not have went down there, right?
Right.
He was going to Brandon's wedding, so he really didn't care. He really cared about getting his son, his heir, back, right? Because that's the way he looked at Brandon. Brandon's the heir. He's more important than any son I got. We got to get Brandon back. So he went down there. You know, and he didn't go down there wearing armor. They say he put the armor on after he demanded the trial by combat. So he didn't go down there to beef or anything else. He really thought he could negotiate his way out of it. That's why you have to shift a little blame here to Rhaegar and Lyanna for hiding out in Summerhall. They could have just stayed in King's Landing. When Rickard got there, now she could have talked. She could have had that conversation that maybe she was able to have, that she was scared to have if no one was there, because she had a whole army on her side. And they could have said, look, Daddy, I love this man. We're getting married. I'm marrying the crown prince.
Mother, maiden, crone, stranger, I am hers, and she is mine. From this day until the end of my days.
That's all I think it would have took. And both of them would have been alive at that time. So I think that Lyanna could have easily done that, but instead Rhaegar and them hid away. Why are they hiding over there? I don't know. I don't know why you would hide. This makes no sense when you're that powerful, when you're that person, especially the times. Why are you hiding? Why all you gotta do is stay in King's Landing. No one can put you there.
I mean, he might have felt for her safety and his safety. Like he might not have known how his dad was unpredictable, so he might not know how his dad would have received her. I mean, there's a lot of factors. That I also think another factor is Robert Baratheon he had some toxic masculinity, like his pride was slighted. Mm-hmm. But I also think he was hurt as well, because I do think that Robert Baratheon and Rhaegar are like cousins. You know what I mean? Like, they're kind of close. I mean, they're not as close as Ned and Robert, but, you know, they've been around each other. And Robert, even at the tourney of Harrenhal, Robert swore to King Aerys, like, I'm going to chase down that Knight of the Laughing Tree and reveal him to you, because he liked them. Like, they were cool. So it was a lot like this. Okay, this guy just took my betrothed. And then you got to also think, like, Robert's parents died coming back from finding Rhaegar's bride. Like, they went to go find Rhaegar's bride, and they died coming back in the Shipbreaker Bay. So he probably has like all these, like, he probably just hates Rhaegar.
Yeah, it gives him good reason to, you know. And I'm sure that Robert Baratheon, you know, listen, when you look at Robert, you got to understand his life was on the line. He was going to be killed no matter what. Him and Ned Stark were going to be killed. They had no choice but to rebel or die. It's either we rebel or we die. We're going to die either way. So we going out fighting or we going out cowering. So they decided to go out fighting, right? And they had their cause. He murdered Ned's father and brother in cold blood. That was enough reason to rebel, because they couldn't just say, oh, we want to rebel because he wants to kill us. That wouldn't have been good enough reason, but that gave them the reason to do it. And they wrote on that, and he won the war and everything else because of his fighting prowess in House Targaryen, and because of something that Rhaegar just didn't do the smart thing to win the war in the end. But that's another video. So I think that there's a lot of blame to go around. I particularly am going to say Rickard Stark is to blame. That's who I picked. But I do think that you could easily say Lyanna and Rhaegar, for the fact that if they would have just stayed at King's Landing when those guys came down there, she was afraid to speak to her father. And that's the whole reason why she hid. Listen, I can't tell my dad I'm really in love with you. And that's why she had all the backing she needed at that particular time. Her brother was there. Her father was there. They got captured. She could have came out there and said, Dad, brother, I love this man. And Rhaegar, you know, from what we know about Rhaegar and what we heard about him, he seems like the type of guy that if they were there, that he would have got on his knee and said, listen, Lord Stark, I'm sorry. I get on my knee in front of you and I'm telling you I love your daughter and I'm marrying her. I'm not just going to make her one of my harem or anything like that. I plan on marrying her. I'm in love with her. I'm sorry the way this went down. He seemed like the type of guy who was willing to, you know, I don't want to say humble himself, but yeah, really humble himself more than he would have had to. And as for his father never really had any animosity towards Rhaegar. Even though he was crazy and various whoever put rumors in his head, you never seen him wanting to harm Rhaegar at all. You never seen that come across his mind. We never get an inkling that he wanted to harm his son at any time.
I will say, right, that the kidnapping or the disappearance of Lyanna and Rhaegar isn't, in my opinion, what started the rebellion. Like, if Rhaegar and Lyanna had just disappeared, I don't think there would necessarily be an all-out rebellion. But whoever told Brandon that information, which made Brandon go to King's Landing, once the Mad King killed Brandon and Rickard, there was no turning back.
Yes.
You can't kill a lord in their heir.
I agree. That was the end of the line for him. It was that, and the fact that he threatened their life too. I think that, you know, if he didn't threaten them to kill them, you know, I don't know if there would have been a rebellion after that. I think they may have had to take that one on the chest. Brandon went down there with his big fat mouth, threatening Rhaegar's life. Now, Rhaegar's father's there, the king. How dare you threaten the prince's life? How, in this medieval society, how dare you? Even who do you think you are to say something publicly right outside of his house? Who do you think you are? I mean, I don't care how mad you are. You have to be smarter than that. And that's why I think his father should have known what was going to happen to him if he did that, and not allowed him to go down there and prevented the whole thing and said, what are you doing? You can't go down there demanding stuff. Calm down. I'm going to go down there and negotiate and find out what's really going on.
That's why Rob is like, I'll go to King's Landing to get my dad, but I'm not going alone. And he raises a whole entire army to go down there and get Ned.
Mm-hmm. And that's smart. And that's the way it should have been handled. He should have handled it smarter. Rickard, another strike against Rickard. I'm going with but there's a lot of blame to go around. There's no definitive action. That's why we ask you in the comment section to leave it in the comment section. Who do you think is responsible for Robert's rebellion? Again, great. Will you, after all the discussion that we had, who are you going with who is fully responsible for this discussion, for this rebellion?
Brandon Stark, but I think whoever told Brandon Stark, and I think whoever told him was Littlefinger. So
you going Brandon, Littlefinger? I'm gonna go with, if I can pick two, I'm gonna go with Lord Rickard. I think could have prevented it. He's my number one, but I do think that Lyanna and Rhaegar had a lot of blame to go around, because if he would have just came out and told the truth, the way Rickard rolled, he was a very political man. Listen, my daughter was marrying the Lord of Storm's End. Now she's getting to be the queen. That's a major upgrade. Maybe if she would have told him, hey, Dad, I'm marrying him. He's hitting it and quitting it. I'm marrying him. I'm going to be the queen of Westeros. Maybe that would have prevented everything if they did that, but instead they just hid in a tower. I don't know why. That makes no sense to me. There's no protection there, but he just hid there. It made no sense for me. Why he ever did that, I don't know. He should have stayed in King's Landing. But as I said, that's who we go with. You guys let us know in the comment section who you go with. I'd like to thank Gray Area for joining me on this edition of Asked and Answered.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I like that it's cool to answer one question and answer it for 30 minutes.
Much better that way, I think. It's just
that's Game of Thrones.
That is Game of Thrones. And if you want your question to be featured on Asked and Answered, just subscribe and leave it in the comment section. And until next time, you know who it is. Peace and stay sexy. All right, that is that. I'll end that broadcast. Whoop.
Yeah, man. Brandon was the fucking